Hi all. Let me talk about the questions of methodology in cultural studies. Key methodologies in cultural studies. When we talk about methodology, there are disputes or disagreements or differences of opinion within cultural studies regarding the use of uh, methodologies. So the question is on the epistemological realm. Especially, there are two major views within cultural studies. One can be termed as representational or realist version, and the second one is the anti-representationalist or influenced by post-structuralist and postmodern theories. So the first view, the representationalist, they believe that it is possible to go and study and understand the reality as such. But on the other hand, the anti-representationalist, especially those thinkers who are influenced by Nietzschean critique of reality, truth, etc. Now you know that Nietzsche is skeptical about any arrivable truths. He says that there are only interpretations, not fixed truths. So there are thinkers who say that it is not possible to arrive at certain kind of a meaning or truth. There is nothing called a truth which we can go and understand. So there are these two broader ways in which cultural studies scholars have tried to understand the question of address the question of methodology. Anyway, when we talk about methodologies, there are mainly three major methodological approaches within cultural studies, even though there are critiques of the very question of methodology or method. So the methodologies can be broadly categorized into three categories or three views. One is the ethnographic studies, secondly, certain textual approaches, and thirdly, reception studies. So when we talk about the first one, ethnographic studies. So you know what, you may be familiar with what is ethnography. It is an empirical and theoretical approach mainly inherited from anthropology and also influenced by the intensive fieldwork approach within anthropological studies. So the ethnographer, usually they participate in people's lives for an extended period of time, or watching what happens, listening to what is said, and asking questions. And the objective may be something like what Clifford and other thinkers have pointed out, to come out with some thick descriptions. So ethnographic studies have been a qualitative approach in the sense that they concentrate on meanings generated by actors through participant observation, interviews, focus studies, focus groups, and textual analysis, and so on. So this is the way uh, ethnographic studies have been going on. However, there are certain issues or critiques on the ethnographic approach. Some thinkers identify some problems with the ethnographic approach. Very fundamental issue is with regard to the realist epistemology based on which ethnography functions, which means that ethnographic studies believe that we will be able to observe and identify and categorize reality, so which is not something everybody accepts. So that is one issue, and data presented by ethnographers are always already an interpretation. Some says that, okay, the data presented by the interpreter or the ethnographer is always already an interpretation, it's not truth. Okay, and again, the positionality of the ethnographer, even though we may not say that the ethnographer is biased or ideologically biased or prejudiced, but again, the position of the ethnographer must influence his observations as well. Then again, the postmodern critics would say that ethnography is a runner of writing which deploys rhetorical devices, and these are always text. Ethnography studies are just texts in which they employ various rhetorical devices. That is being said, we may not be able to completely disregard ethnographic studies fully within the purview of cultural studies. We can argue for a more reflexive and dialogical position or approach to ethnography. And again, we need to take it into consideration the advantages of uh, ethnographic studies as well. One primary or very fundamental idea or advantage is it can combat ethnocentrism. And ethnocentrism, it is the belief that our culture is superior to any other culture. And when we are in contact with other cultures, when we observe them and study them, we'll be able to come out with a kind of a you know some kind of a respect for other cultures will be able we will be able to develop a respect for other cultures. That is one of the significant advantages of ethnographic studies. So ethnography has been um, one significant methodological tool used by cultural studies scholars, especially those culturalist school of cultural studies. Okay, and the next method is textual approaches. Under textual approaches, we can include semiotics and narrative theory and deconstruction, things like that, which are very familiar for you as well. So, semiotics believes that text as science, everything is a science system, and semiotics is the study of such a science system, systems of science. For example, if you how they conduct an analysis. For example, television programs. So they argue that television news is not the representation, a mirror-like representation of reality, but they are just a constructed representation. So it's a site struggles over what counts as meaning and truth. So this is the way they would be uh, going on with their analysis. And under narrative theory, they'll be discussing the narrative aspects of uh, these messages. For example, text as narrative, every text tells some kind of a story. So a narrative is an ordered sequential account that makes claim to be a record of event, and it has been influenced by structuralism and all that. So as Todorov and others said, a narrative minimally concerns the disruption of an equilibrium and the tracing of the consequences of such disruptions until a new equilibrium is achieved. For example, let's see how a soap opera or a television serial narrates the story. So there will be some kind of a family system or something which goes in a very equilibrium manner or a very peaceful way. So some kind of a disruption occurs within the family, and the remaining part will be based on those disruptions, and at the end a new equilibrium will be maintained, and everything is over or everything ends happily ever after or something like that. So this is the way a narration functions, and narrative theory addresses issues like that. Every text is a narration. And the third textual approach is deconstruction, influenced by Derridian deconstruction and Paul Deman and others, Spivak and others. So under Derridian view, he is engaged in the undoing of the binary opposites of the Western philosophy. Dismantling of hierarchical oppositions like reason, uh, reality, appearance, such kinds of nature, culture, such kinds of binaries have been destroyed, and that is the way and he is also talking about the difficulty to come out with a single kind of a meaning, stable meaning, which is not possible. That is what deconstruction also argues. So there are textual approaches within cultural studies, or cultural studies scholars have made use of textual approaches in which they will be focusing on semiotics, narratives theory, deconstruction, etc. And the third uh, methodology is being used is reception theory. So under the reception theory, they will be focusing on the meanings as understood by the or as consumed by the readers or audiences or consumers. They will be concentrating only on the consuming part of the meaning. So here the readers are active consumers of meaning. They are not uh, you know passive consumers. The writer gives a meaning and it is passively being consumed by the reader. That is not the way in which a reception studies will be viewing things. So under reception theories, there are two major categories. One is the reception studies, encoding, decoding, model envisaged by Stuart Hall, and the other one is the hermeneutics and the literary reception theories. Okay, so under Hall's encoding and decoding model, he says that the production of meaning doesn't ensure consumption of that meaning or as the encoder might have intended. So the encoder or the, for example, the writer, he may have a meaning in his mindset. Okay, and he is writing a text. That doesn't mean that the reader or the decoder decode the exact meaning. So the circumstances and the social situation of the reader or decoder will influence the meaning he generates after reading. For example, the gender or the class position of the decoder will influence the meaning he generates after reading a text. So this is what Stuart Hall argues in his encoder decoder model or encoding decoding model. And hermeneutics and literary reception studies also, for example, I think it's like Gadam. They argue that understanding is always from the position and point of view or the person who understands. So it not merely reproduction of the textual meaning. What happens is not just the reproduction of the textual meaning, but production of meaning by the reader. So the reader produces meaning. So this is the way hermeneutics and the literary reception theories uh, come out with the arguments of meaning making production. So the point is that under methodologies in cultural studies, we will be able to uh, put together all these three various different methods like ethnographic studies and textual approaches and reception studies under this banner. And this is the way scholars undertaking research projects within cultural studies. I hope these are clear. You'll have to read much about Hall's encoding decoding model, etc. Okay, thank you.